Welcome to Hot Takes Live, the summer edition, and you are joining us on our ops stage. And so I'm super looking forward to all of our speakers today. My name is Joe Eicher. I'm our Director of RevOps Solutions here at Breadcrumbs. So a lot of these topics I'm super excited for. If you guys have questions or comments as our speakers are talking, feel free to throw them into the comment section on the right of the platform. We can definitely bring those up and talk as we go. But I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm going to bring on our first presenter. His name is Andy Mowat. Andy, welcome to Hot Takes Live. How are you?
I'm good, Joe. Thanks so much. Appreciate the introduction.
Definitely. Super excited for your topic today. Your next CRM is a data warehouse. Interested to hear what you have to say. So I'm going to step out of the screen and let you take over.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. Great to see everybody. This topic is intended, at least the title is intended to be a little bit controversial, but I do believe this is where the world is headed. Just as a quick background, I currently am running a company called Gated. We give people back control of their own attention. So I've moved from running RevOps at 3 unicorns to doing Gated, but I always am advising, investing, and just talking to people about the state of RevOps, the state of data. It's just been passionate for me for a long time. I have had some fascinating backgrounds in terms of running a company in Prague and spending a lot of time over in Europe. But at this point in time, I am laser focused for the last maybe 15 years on scaling companies up. So let's get into it real quick. At Culture Amp, I got a chance to take a company from, call it, 5 million in revenue to about 100 million in revenue over the course of 4 years. As part of that, we built out the modern data stack. Happy to talk more about that. I'm sure other people will, but I think there's terrific articles on that if you're not familiar with what the modern data stack is. But as part of that process, I observed a couple things. One is there were just so many metrics that we couldn't access out of Salesforce, out of HubSpot. One of my favorite is pipeline coverage, right? Normally you can show up and you can talk about what's the pipeline we have, but with pipeline coverage, you can start to talk about how does that compare to other periods in time, how are we ramping pipeline, and you can create that right dialogue between marketing and sales. Number two is the flexibility of data architectures. So there's lots, again, questions you just can't answer out of the legacy stack. A great example here was we were selling our second product and we'd asked how long, what's the sales cycle for that? What's the win rate? And because a rep would add a SKU to a renewal op, have a discussion, remove it, you couldn't see that or report on that in Salesforce because opportunities were real time. But the ability to kind of look back at the history of that and analyze it was very powerful. We also saw, just at a fundamental level, like even after we had better data, better insights, running the exec and the decisions around go-to-market better with the modern data stack, it didn't actually change the systems that our teams were using. So we didn't make them much more productive. We were just a lot smarter in what we did. And so that's kind of the learning process that I went through at Culture Amp. So how is this informed where I think the world's going? I fundamentally do believe that your next CRM will be a data warehouse. I don't necessarily mean that your reps will log into that, and happy to talk about that in more detail. I've written an article about that on my LinkedIn as well too. But I think what I saw is everybody is constrained by both the architecture of the go-to-market systems, and they're really constrained by the rep. And so if you think about it, when you put the core data model into sale, it's no longer in Salesforce, but it's into a data warehouse, you can do a lot more things that I just described on the previous page. Number two is the system your reps log into, it's not going to be Salesforce anymore. I think a great example there is Scratchpad. I've invested in Scratchpad. A lot of us that are running RevOps or sales teams have seen that your reps start using it. It's more flexible. They can be a little bit quicker. I had an entire team come to me and say, hey, we love this tool. So I actually ended up investing in it. But that's just the beginning of what you could do. Imagine if you can roll a UX for your team that's not necessarily locked and loaded with your data model. It becomes a lot more flexible. And then I think there's this entire new breed of systems for go-to-market data, for go-to-market ops, that will be graded. A great example there, I would say, would be Sweep. They take your sales processes, you can design them visually, and then they can push them into your Salesforce. But they could also push them to other places, like a data warehouse as well, too. So, um, if you believe this world is coming, what are some of the things you can do? And I'm assuming different people have different levels of maturity on the data side. But one is just make sure that you've invested in your team's data fluency. I would say at Box, we had a course that anyone in the company could take. And it was called about a 12-week course for SQL. And it brought everybody in the company along with us. So we just had a much more data fluent company. Number two, I say invest in your data stack. There's lots of ways to do this. There's kind of the full modern data stack, which is, frankly, at CultureAmp, it took us about a year to get there. But there are also tools that can help you get there with a little bit less complexity, things like Boost Up or Syncery. And then finally, rethink the metrics that you're holding your team accountable to. We talked about a couple of those, pipeline coverage, but let me give you pipeline coverage is one, sales cycles on renewals is another one. But another one I've always loved is, and we use this at Box because we also had a fairly sophisticated but complex data stack, was how many days before a churn or a contraction happens did the CS rep identify it? Sometimes churn itself is out of the CS rep's control, but what's not out of their control is identifying it and working it and coordinating across the company. And so we started to hold people accountable to, are you identifying and working churn in the right way and risk of churn? So this isn't tomorrow, but it's coming soon, which is it's less about configuring systems. It's more about configuring data. I really am excited as I think through both my investing, my advising, and next steps of career to watch how this develops. So at this point in time, I'm going to go ahead and turn over to Q&A. And Joe, feel free to pop back in whenever you want.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Yeah, I'm not seeing any comments. Actually, no, we got one here. So let's bring this up on the screen from Lisa. She asks, what times pipeline coverage is best, or is it industry or company focused?
Yeah, great question. Definitely, first it's going to be, I think there's some general industry standards. You could think in broad terms, 3 to 5 times pipeline coverage. It's going to vary dramatically by segment. If you're in enterprise, you're going to need more. If you're in SMB, you're less. We even saw variations by region as well too. So hopefully that helps. Box and CultureAmp are very different businesses, but still you could dial it in within a decent percentage. And then also the beauty is you start to be able to look at what did we do last quarter? What did we do the prior quarter? And so you can start to understand, is the pipeline coverage going to be sufficient for our business?
Yeah, I think most businesses, at least from our perspective, managing a smaller sales team, that pipeline coverage is huge. It's just an initial goal for a lot of startups, trying to get that pipeline coverage up to a certain amount, just to make sure that you've got not only the next 30 days but the next 6 months covered. I had a question about.
Well, I was just going to add to that real quick.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating to see the changes in meetings when you don't just go from do we have enough pipeline to how is pipeline evolving, right? And that's what you couldn't pull out with the classic Salesforce. But we were able to have conversations around, hey, it feels like pipeline coverage is a little bit low. Has the sales team cleaned it up? And you'd come back a week later and you'd be able to see this, this drop in coverage or this pop in coverage, or you'd be able to see what happens. And so you really start to understand much deeper what drives pipeline.
Yeah, and you get to have much deeper conversations with your reps around priorities and how things are progressing, and then you get to map stuff back to those stage movements. It helps reinforce some of those metrics that you guys are looking at in terms of conversion through different stages as well. Makes everything more predictable, right? Or at least gets to tweak that. Great. One last question I had, maybe before we wrap up, you mentioned something from that rep perspective around maybe they're interfacing or interacting with the data warehouse a bit more. I wanted you to clarify that statement a bit, because the reps today are either in Salesforce, and struggling with that to some capacity. You mentioned Scratchpad as maybe a good solution there, but the data piece is just super interesting to get everybody on the same page around that, those unified metrics and entering the right information at the right place. Is there solutions you guys have had for that, around that data warehouse of making sure that across all systems things are being are being used in sync with each other?
Yeah, I'd say first off, I don't think there's perfect solutions for a lot of this stuff, but I think it's coming.
Hmm.
There's to me that if reps, to be clear, the your next CRM is your data warehouse is a very bold statement on
Hmm.
purpose.
Yeah.
I because of just the update time and all of that, I don't think reps themselves will be logging into the data warehouse. There's going to need to be
Hmm.
an abstraction layer. Um,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to pump back into Salesforce. It can pump somewhere else. I think at a fundamental level, I look at it two ways. One is there's like insights and dashboards that allow you to be intelligent. Those tend to more be like management, executive level. And then there is like the rep UX. And the problem with that you're seeing is, hey, I want reps to identify something on the opportunity and something on the contact and something on the account. Well, all of a sudden that becomes a mess. And
Hmm.
so I think what will end up happening really is there's just what you want to be able to do is optimize for every single rep role, and even in different regions, different ways, and different segments, different ways, the right UX for reps that they can log in and do. And you want to be able to make as many of those decisions as possible for them of this goes here, this goes here,
Hmm.
this is the minimum set. One thing we did at Culture Amp was we created a single button on the opportunity, right? You hit the button and it says like, how can I help you? And you'd say like, I need security review help. I need deal desk help. And it would be, I think a lot of the job of ops and teams is to be able to use data to make those to allow the reps to spend as much time as possible with prospects and customers.
Definitely, definitely. Let's get to Lisa's comment here as well. Any comments on methods to help accelerate pipeline movement, or is that another session? Frankly, I'm not sure if we have another session on that, Lisa. So maybe if you have a comment.
Drop me a note, LinkedIn, Lisa. Happy to help. But if at a fundamental level, I would say community and the broader sense of community is really powerful. I've got an article on my LinkedIn around how we used community to accelerate and engage pipeline. I think it's not as the ability to kind of like get on people's mindset at Culture Amp. We knew with eventually people were going to want to be able to get that feedback from people, and our whole job was how do we just stay top of mind. So events, community are some of my favorite ways to go.
Definitely. All right. Well, think we're good on comments right now. So Andy, appreciate you jumping in for this session. For anybody that's interested in listening back, we'll certainly have recordings for you later on. But Andy, great talking to you today. Best of luck.
Thanks. Cheers.
All right. And for everybody else, we will be back at 10:55 Eastern with our next speaker, Alexandra, and we will talk to you in a bit.